Pandemic. By A.S. Geek 2012. Chapter 27. Unexpected Arrivals. Hello, Sunset. Long time, no see. For a long moment, all Sunset Shimmer could do was stare. She almost refused to believe what she was seeing, or that she was hearing native equestrian for the first time in 20 years. Star Singer. Star Singer's smile held a slight edge. I suppose I should be glad you remembered me. She glanced at the gurgling crystal apparatus against one wall. Teaching yourself biology? I guess I sort of left you no choice. The shield abruptly vanished as Sunset approached. She sniffed the air before throwing herself at Star Singer and pulling her into a tight embrace. Great Celestia, it really is you, Sunset said in a quavering voice. Star hesitated before wrapping her forelegs around Sunset to return the embrace. I have to admit, I didn't exactly expect this kind of reception. Why wouldn't I greet you like this? Sunset said with a wide smile. We made a great team. It really saddened me when you... She trailed off as her eyes fell on the pendant. Who's listening in? Your niece, Twilight Sparkle. Sunset gasped. Twily? She's alive. Star gave her friend a level look. Yes, as is the rest of your family, and the princesses, and all of Equestria. Sunset's eyes misted. Oh, heavens, this is wonderful news. Equestria is alive. I can complete my task in time, so now it will stay that way. Sunset, wait. Sunset looked towards the runic circle. Why didn't Twily come herself? I've missed her terribly. I asked to see you first, said Star in a soft voice. I thought you might listen to me because we shared the same goal. Sunset gave her friend a puzzled look. I don't understand. Whatever you're doing, it's not needed. I was wrong. There was no dark age. The princess's which, I might add, includes Twilight. Sunset smiled. I knew Twily had it in her. Listen to me. Star Singer cried. She and Princess Celestia and a reformed Princess Luna have been protecting Equestria just fine and dandy all this time. Not to mention there's Princess Cadance, and the princess she gave birth to. I'd say that's a lot of alicorn power to keep Equestria safe for the foreseeable future. And was it just their inherent power that kept the dark forces at bay? Sunset asked. The fact that they had to do anything means you were partially right. Those dark forces did come, didn't they? They were dealt with, said Star in a flat voice. And I ask again, was it their inherent power that kept those dark forces at bay? No, they had help, said Star in a lower voice. The elements of harmony are real. They're not just some legendary relic. There's a whole system of magic behind them that goes beyond just. I know they're real, Sunset said. I knew that when I scanned Discord. I'm glad that they had a use in propping up Equestria until a real solution can. They don't need or want your solution. Sunset frowned. My solution? What happened to our solution? Everything I'm doing is based on your foresight. This is your idea, I simply took it to its logical conclusion. Star Singer narrowed her eyes. I never talked about transforming an entire species. At one time you thought it a viable option, said Sunset. Or have you forgotten the preliminary research that we did into the matter? And you told me you abandoned that approach. You conveniently hid all that additional research from me. Sunset waved a forehoof. You're evading the question. Star took a deep breath. All right, fine. Maybe I did consider that possibility, but a lot has happened since then. Sunset looked thoughtful. Tell me, Starry, how many ponies exist in Equestria? Star hesitated. What does that have to do with anything? Humor me, please. Well, there hasn't been a formal census in some time, but back then we had calculated it was around 50 million. I don't think it's gone up a whole lot since then. This planet has 7 billion inhabitants. Star Singer's mouth dropped open, and her pupils shrank to pinpricks. Did you say billion? Sunset smiled. 7 billion potential ponies. Star Singer swallowed hard. Do you realize how much magical potential that is? That kind of power could have kept Equestria safe against any enemy, all without depending on ancient relics or unreliable magic that only deigns to make its presence known if events all happen to align the right way. It would virtually guarantee the survival of pony kind. That's the very thing you and I both wanted from the start. Star Singer hesitated before shaking her head. No, we don't have the right to do this. You're wiping out one species in favor of another. I'm doing nothing of the sort, said Sunset. I'm simply giving them something that will help them be better than they ever were before. Star frowned. And you think these natives so primitive that you need to? That is precisely not what I am thinking, Sunset declared. On the contrary, they've done amazing things without magic, and they'll carry that knowledge into their pony forms. Star Singer stared. Without magic? They have no magic at all. Not in the least, said Sunset. Now do you see how this is for their benefit as well? What happens if one of those dark forces finds this world? This whole planet will be helpless. What would you prefer? A world of magic-less beings left unaltered and ripe to be killed or enslaved, or a world of ponies with enough magic to withstand any foe? Star remained silent for a long moment. But what about these amazing things you talked about? Don't they have some sort of defense? Oh, yes, said Sunset in a low voice. They have weapons that can vaporize an entire city in an instant. But they're totally blind to magic. They don't even believe it exists. They might not even know they're under attack until it's too late. Even if they did know, just a tiny number of those weapons I mentioned would cause catastrophic environmental damage. Wielding magic directly is a far more elegant and safer solution. Star again fell silent, her eyes clouded. I'm honestly shocked at this reluctance, Starry, said Sunset in a softer voice. I'm also rather surprised Twily isn't here herself. If any pony would understand what I'm trying to do and embrace it wholeheartedly, it would be her. She had the intelligence to know what I was really trying to teach her. Star Singer frowned. She's the one trying to stop you. Sunset hesitated. I beg your pardon. She doesn't believe in what you taught her. Her life took a different path after the princess. Star trailed off. Sunset raised an eyebrow. After the princess what? Star shook her head. Never mind. What is it? Sunset demanded. I'm not sure I should tell you. Before Sunset could reply, magic flared inside the runic circle. She snapped her gaze to it just as the silvery plane of the portal opening appeared, its surface rippling as a figure stepped through. Sunset's eyes widened, and she stumbled back a step as her eyes beheld her new visitor. You won't have to tell her, Star Singer, said Twilight. I will. Twily, Sunset said in a hushed voice. For a moment whose silence was broken only by the thrumming energies of the portal, the two mares stared at one another. Twilight's eyes glistened, her heart lurching as she gazed upon a beloved family member she had lost twice, once by apparent death and once by spell. Sunset swallowed hard, her eyes beholding a pony she had desperately wanted to see grow up and become the powerful mare she now was. Twilight stepped forward, but a shield sprang up around her as it had Star Singer. You might as well lower this, Aunt Sunset, said Twilight as her horn glowed. It will only take me a minute to work around your traps. Sunset took a step closer. Why should you need to? She said in a voice as much pleading as it was questioning. Surely Starry was wrong. You can't possibly be against me. Everything Star Singer said is true, said Twilight. You don't need to do this. Equestria is safe and strong, and we can keep it that way without transforming an entire species. This is not what I had taught you, Sunset declared. I was sure I had convinced you of the power behind pony magic, that it is the only thing that can be relied upon. You're smarter than this, Twilight, I know you are. I didn't grow up the way you had intended, Twilight said in a softer voice. Until just recently, I didn't remember you at all. Sunset gave her a confused look. What are you talking about? After what you had been planning reached the Griffins, Celestia was afraid of the fallout. She didn't want to risk the rest of the world making war on Equestria. She cast a spell that suppressed all memory of you. Sunset's eyes widened. She did what? I never espoused your views because I never remembered them, not until the spell was lifted recently, said Twilight. Maybe that's proof that our solution was never needed, said Star Singer. Twilight and her friends have done amazing things to keep Equestria safe, Anne. Sunset narrowed her eyes at Twilight. Are you telling me that you grew up not even knowing I existed? Sunset thundered. I was just forgotten? All my accomplishments erased like they never happened. I don't like it either, Auntie. Twilight cried. I was upset with her as well. Realize the situation you put Princess Celestia in, Star Singer said. The Griffins had somehow found out what you did, Anne. Of course they found out. Sunset roared. I was the one who let them find out. I was desperate to force Celestia's hoof. You think I wanted to leave Equestria? You think I wanted to rip myself from my family? She turned to Twilight. From you? I loved you like a daughter, Twilight. I didn't want to leave you, but I did because I felt I had no choice. But now you do have a choice, Twilight said. You can take the time to understand. Star hesitated before adding, Sunset, listen to her. The magic of harmony, just may be enough to keep Equestria safe. Sunset whirled around to face Star. Maybe enough? You don't even believe your own words. I'm trying to, Sunset, because what you're doing is wrong. There is no right or wrong here, only what's necessary. There's more to Equestria than just pony magic and harmony, Auntie. Twilight declared. It's not all about raw power. You're taking too simplistic an approach. Sunset turned towards Twilight. That's where you're wrong, Twilight. It is simple. I'm just sorry you can't see that, but you've been turned against me by a pony I once admired. Her horn blazed. I wanted your blessing, even your help, but what I cannot accept is your interference. The shield disappeared with a faint pop. Auntie, stop, don't make me fight you. Twilight cried. Star's pupils shrank. Sunset, no, wait, don't. Even as the words left Star Singer's mouth, Sunset let loose a blast of magic towards Twilight. Star turned her head away as the brilliance hurt her eyes, and she braced herself against a scream that never came. When the light died, Star dared to look. Sunset stood at the edge of the runic circle, a char mark spreading across the concrete in its center. The circle remained eerily quiescent for another few moments, until a blue light flickered about its edge, and the low thrumming of the portal returned. Star's mouth fell open, and she galloped up to the circle. What did you just? Clever, Sunset said in a low voice. Very clever, Twilight. What did you do to her? Sunset turned to Star Singer. Calm down. No pony was hurt. I could never bring myself to harm a single hair on Twilight's mane, and I doubt I would win a direct confrontation with an alicorn. But what happened? Sunset smiled. She tricked me, and rather effectively. That bit about her trying to work around my trap? That was a diversion. She was trying to break the portal anchor. So was that the real reason you talked to me? Another diversion. Star swallowed. I had no idea Twilight was planning this. She likely tried it from the other end and realized I had taken precautions against it, said Sunset. So she had to come here to do it. Only she couldn't do it herself, as I would notice her trying to impart that much energy into the portal and stop her. So she used my energy instead. But what were you trying to do? Star asked. I was simply trying to send her back through the portal and lock it down. Instead, she cast a spell that changed the energy to her own purposes and severed the anchor. And you stopped her. On the contrary, I gave her a little boost. It will buy me time. Star Singer frowned. Time for what? Sunset levitated the far-hearing stone pendant from around Star's neck and set it aside after casting a neutralizing spell upon it. For me to convince you of the merits of what I am trying to accomplish here. Then maybe you can help me convince Twilight. Asterisk. The quiet of the mountainside was broken only by the wind that swept over the snow-covered ground and whistled faintly through the branches of the pine trees, at least until a glowing pane appeared in mid-air. Energy crackled and thrummed, and a tunnel briefly extruded itself into infinity long enough to dump 2 flailing ponies towards the ground before closing with a low boom that echoed into the distance. The ponies had little time to react before striking the ground, tumbling down the steep gradient another dozen pony lengths before landing in 2 colored heaps, snow crusting their fur and hair. A pair of saddlebags landed a short distance away, sending up another puff of snow. They remained still for another few moments, breathing heavily, until the lighter-colored one rose to her hooves and frowned. Starlight glanced up at where the portal had been and muttered, "It'll follow the contour of the land." Right. Oh, stop complaining, said Twilight as she stood. She shook herself and then her wings. It was only a short distance. At least we made it in one piece. No thanks to your wild scheme. Twilight stepped up to the fallen saddlebags, hooves crunching against the snow. There was nothing wild about it. I had planned from the start to break the anchor. I simply had to adapt my methods. Twilight looked around and smiled. I almost can't believe this. We're actually standing in a completely different universe. This is amazing. Look, can you nerd out later? Starlight said. Do you even know where we are? And if you answer on an alien world, I swear I'm going to slap you. Twilight rolled her eyes as she levitated the saddlebags to her barrel. Really, we should be right where I plotted the drift of the portal would take us. She lit her horn. Which is not far from the source of, She paused. Oh, dear. Starlight's eyes widened. Is that a small unexpected complication, oh dear, or a weary totally screwed, oh dear? Twilight's horn brightened, and she turned towards the northeast. The greatest concentration of transformation magic is in the direction I expected, but, further away. How much further? I had wanted to land us as close to the town as the Whitetail Woods are to Ponyville, said Twilight. We're a little further than that. How much further, Twilight? More like half the distance to Appaloosa. Starlight face hoofed. It's not that bad, said Twilight as she stepped towards a break in the trees. Soon as we get off this mountain, I can teleport us short distances over level terrain, Her gaze swept a landscape filled with more snow-capped and densely forested mountains. Oh, dear. Great, Starlight muttered. Sunset just had to start her apocalypse in the most mountainous place on the planet. Actually, if this world is as geologically active as the old exploration reports indicated, I would expect it capable of even rougher terrain in tectonically. I didn't ask for a geology lesson. Starlight exclaimed. What I want to know is, what the hey happened? Twilight checked the contents of the saddlebags for damage. And Sunset had just enough time to realize what I had done, and she pushed the portal endpoint further away to delay us. Well, congratulate her, then, because it worked spectacularly. Starlight, calm down, Twilight declared. We need to get moving to have any hope of getting to Aunt Sunset and stopping this. If we can, now that she has Star Singer helping her. We don't know that. Oh, come on, Starlight said. You heard yourself how wishy-washy she was getting at the end. I knew this was a bad idea from the start. And if we hadn't sent her first, I would never have had the chance to work out how to break the anchor, said Twilight. That's part of what swayed me in favor of letting her go first. She bought me valuable time to craft the proper spell. Starlight sighed. I suppose you're right. Her horn glowed as she cast a spell to dry off her fur and hair. Though you're lucky you had enough time to fetch me and the supplies. Luck had nothing to do with it, said Twilight. I specifically wanted Aunt Sunset to think I'm alone and unprepared. We need to press whatever advantage we can get. Now, let's go. Asterisk. Eileen awoke from a deep slumber and stared up from the sofa at an unfamiliar ceiling. It took her a few moments to remember she was not in her apartment in Denver. She rubbed her grainy eyes before touching her forehead. She was cooler than she had been the night before, what she could remember of it once the police had brought her to the house, but the rest of her felt stifling hot and sweaty. She kicked the covers back, still in the clothes she had worn the day before. She groaned and forced herself to sit up as footsteps descended the stairs behind her. Are you all right? Came Sarah's voice. Eileen frowned. Like you care, sis. Why even check on me? I heard you moving around and thought you might be awake. I won't be awake for another few hours, Eileen murmured as she heard Sarah walk around the edge of the sofa. Then maybe you'll be kind enough to take a cold shower. Our water heater is temperamental. The kids are sleeping in this morning due to school being closed, so you'll have it to yourself. Eileen lifted her gaze. I'm touched by your... She trailed off and stared. Sarah looked flustered for a moment at the scrutiny. She folded her arms, her orange-furred equine ears drawing back slightly. Something wrong. The fuck am I seeing? Eileen muttered. This is what you wanted, right? To be in the middle of all this? Well, congratulations, now you are. They didn't say anything about this. Keep your voice down, please, said Sarah. I don't want you waking the kids. Also, these things are sensitive to noise, and I already have a headache I can't get rid of. You didn't have this last night, said Eileen. No one did. Laura is worse, said Sarah. She just didn't want to deal with the angst, so she stayed in her room. She had no idea you'd stagger in about to drop. The police wanted to take you to the hospital. Eileen frowned and forced herself to her feet. I'm fine. Yes, now, after a night's sleep. What would have happened had you succeeded in your stupid scheme? I doubt you could have driven safely. I don't need a fucking lecture from you, Eileen said as she turned away. I just want to impress upon you how ill-conceived this was, said Sarah. You didn't do your son any good. He had to see you like this, so sick you almost collapsed. Then maybe he knows I actually care for him, Eileen murmured. You know what? I give in. You win again. I was stupid. That's what you want to hear, right? That you can be 10 times the mother I could ever be. Sarah hesitated. That's not what I mean. Eileen turned towards her. It's what you're thinking. Sarah remained silent. Sis, you're all turning into fucking horses. Ponies. Whatever. You think I want that to happen to Bob? Sarah frowned. You think I want this to happen to anyone in our family? Even you. You don't have to pretend to care, Eileen said. Sarah marched up to her sister. You haven't seen Laura. She can't even stand up straight. We got another reverse 911 call this morning to tell us they're setting up shelters for those who can't care for themselves. As much as I want to keep the family together, I may have to take her there, simply because I don't know how much longer any of us can care for her. Eileen had no response. You don't have a damn clue what we're dealing with, Sarah muttered. Everybody in town has been exposed. You spiriting Bob away would have done nothing. If he does get this is the best place for him, where they're already set up to deal with it. What are you getting at? Eileen asked in an annoyed voice. Sarah clenched her hands into fists. You were the last one in the family that had a chance of not being exposed. Or you'd be the last one to get it. I thought that maybe, just maybe, this one time you'd rise to the challenge if the rest of the family is disabled. Well, I did. Eileen said. I'm here. I can help. I wasn't expecting this to be a free ride. Sarah sighed. And who's going to help Mom? She's fine, Eileen said in a subdued voice. The assisted care place is top-notch. But who handles her paperwork? Who does her taxes? Who deals with the home when they have questions, or when they just can't understand her heavy Irish accent? You do that. How the hell are you going to do any of that from here? There is such a thing as the internet, you know, Eileen said. Eileen, you know you have to have documents notarized half the time, and there are arrangements for her care that have to be done in person when. I want to see Bob, said Eileen. Sarah frowned. I already said, the kids are still in bed. You'll see him when he gets up, and only if he wants to see you. What the hell does that mean? And since when can you dictate when I can or can't see my son? I told you, keep your voice. Mom. Sarah spun around. A slightly pale Jenny stood at the top of the stairs. What is it? It's Laura, Jenny said in a hollow voice. You better come upstairs. Sarah's blood ran cold. Not, does she have, are her feet? Not that. It's, you better come up here. Sarah swallowed hard. Eileen, get Harry, he's in his office. Second door on the right through that hallway. Eileen glanced from Jenny to Sarah before nodding and rushing off. Sarah bolted up the stairs and tore down the hallway, her heart hammering, terrible visions of what had happened to Laura racing through her head. None of them prepared her for what she saw when she stood in the doorway of her daughter's bedroom. Laura sat on the edge of her bed. She clutched the remnants of her nightgown to herself, a ragged tear reaching halfway down its back. From the glimpses of her body around it, fur had spread up her legs and around her hips. Her feet were still untouched, though that was not at all what riveted Sarah's shimmering gaze. Wings emerged from Laura's shoulders, the feathers the same sunshine yellow shade as her fur. Laura. Sarah breathed. Are you? The rest of her question died on her lips when Laura looked up. I thought they said we're turning into ponies. Her ears drew back, and her wings quivered. Ponies don't have wings. What exactly am I becoming? Sarah hesitated, taken aback by the eerie calm with which her daughter had spoken. She finally rushed forward, hugging her daughter tightly. I don't know, honey, she said in a quavering voice. But I promise, we'll get you to someone who can find out. Asterisk. Kevin had been asked the day before to move into a dormitory on-site set up for all personnel directly assigned to the emergency to avoid any potential chaos that might spread to the streets as the symptoms progressed. It had said nothing about the chaos he encountered inside the clinic that morning. Kevin had barely enough time to read the reports on Fred's condition when Sandra tracked him down. Sandra, what's going on? It's like all hell has broken loose. It has. Sandra grasped his arm and led him to a conference room, closing the door behind her. There's been a complete explosion of new symptoms. I gathered that, said Kevin. Does it have anything to do with the imaging that was taken late yesterday? That imaging showed an unknown rearrangement of the shoulder and upper back in some patients, and an unknown restructuring of neural matter in the frontal lobes of the brain in others, as well as odd bone changes to the skull, said Sandra. And did it progress further? Yes. Sandra paused. Wings and horns. Kevin stared. Did I just hear you right? Sandra opened the folder she carried. She took out several photographs and thrust them at Kevin. Kevin slipped on his reading glasses as he took the photos in hand. His lips parted as he was presented with a picture of a young male patient, a single tapering horn jutting from his forehead. The next was of an older woman who had sprouted wings, her feathers the same pale red color as the fur that covered her legs. Good God! We knew something was in the works, said Sandra. And these are only the people we just happened to have under observation at the hospital and the clinic. Kevin sat down heavily in a chair, still staring at the photos. What of Laura Tanner? Her imaging had shown skeletal deformities about the shoulders. She likely has her own pair of wings. Sandra sighed. This is going to hit the news big time. Kevin took off his glasses. We couldn't keep this under wraps forever. We have to share information if for no other reason than to solicit help from other scientists. We certainly need it. Kevin leaned back in his chair. Have we learned anything at all? We've exceeded in expanding our repertoire of what we don't know, said Sandra. Especially considering the initial test results for Mr. Turner. Genetics is not my forte, but I did look at the reports, said Kevin. DNA is non-human but matches no known equine species. The test on the hoof scrapings said they found something like keratin, but not quite. Just like the horns are bone, but not quite, and the feathers are similar to what we would expect from an avian, but not quite. In every single damn test, there's some element we don't understand. Did the testing on me reveal anything? Kevin asked. We're still churning through those, said Sandra. Which reminds me, we'll need to draw some more blood again, as a few vials were misplaced. We did get through a preliminary genetic test. All we found was a mutation on a gene responsible for mitochondria development. We assume it's benign since there's nothing in your medical records about any related issues. No, I never had anything like that, said Kevin. I take it there's no link between that and my immunity. Not that we can immediately see, but we're still investigating. Sandra frowned. You see what I mean, Kevin? We're not getting any answers, just more questions. We don't have a clue what triggers the start of the transformation, and we're running out of time. I thought you said we prevented this from spreading, said Kevin. I'm hoping we did, but new cases are still popping up outside the emergency zone. What I'm more concerned with is a report I just got not 10 minutes ago from the contingent in Breckenridge. Sandra shuffled through the pages in her folder. Kevin, you said in your initial examination of Laura Tanner that she took 3 days for the hair color to come in completely, 2 more before the eyes changed color, then 2 for the tail. Kevin nodded. Yes, that was fairly consistent across all my patients. The report from Breckenridge concerns some patients who have progressed to a tail. They said it took 2 days for the hair color and only an additional day for the eye color change. If this isn't just a local aberration, it could mean that later generations of the disease progress the transformation faster. Sandra snapped the folder closed. If that's the case, anyone who has symptoms now will likely be completely transformed in less than a week. Kevin's throat tightened as he recalled that day that he was told his wife's condition was terminal. His wife had chosen to donate her body to science when she died so they could learn more about the aggressive cancer that was killing her. I don't want to abandon them to their fate. I've had enough of that in my life. I don't want to either, but right now the focus has to be on containment, said Sandra. We have to keep these people in isolation indefinitely until we know if they're still contagious. It's likely only a matter of days before we're going to ask everyone in town to enter the shelters. It's the only way we can be sure to keep this contained. Kevin stood up. And what about the new influenza cases? We tested them, said Sandra in a level voice. Vanilla H1N1. They've agreed to be transferred to the hospital, including Mr. Turner's daughter, and they're undergoing aggressive treatment with antivirals. Assuming it's successful, we'll observe them to see if it eliminated susceptibility to ETS. What of the patients outside of Lazy Pines? Sandra shifted her weight. Every last one said they had the flu prior to these symptoms. Sandra. I know. Sandra snapped. But the fact of the matter is, influenza doesn't do this. You were the one who praised me for sticking to my guns, Kevin said in irritation. Has that changed? No. The CDC is still going all out to stop this, but realize that even if they're successful, or this surge burns itself out, that would mean potentially another 300,000 people transformed if it is directly related to the flu. I'm more concerned about what happens if they're not successful. The only way a pandemic can be stopped is by a total shutdown of the transportation grid, said Sandra. Aircraft, trains, highways, everything. Washington is not prepared to take that drastic a step without hard proof. That's not going to happen when test after goddamn test comes back with absolutely no variation between this and the H1N1 that ran its course during the first part of the flu season. That alone should be a warning sign that we're missing something, Kevin declared. Janet Turner already had this season's variant of the flu. Sandra paused. I beg your pardon. Didn't she tell you that? She's been distraught, said Sandra in a subdued voice. She's been demanding to see her father. We have her medical records, but she must not have sought treatment for her former bout with the flu as there's no record of it. I think this warrants further investigation, said Kevin. Because if we find more cases like that, then that might mean that this season's flu vaccine is absolutely useless, and the CDC will only be spinning its wheels. Shit, Sandra murmured. All right, let me see what I can do. It may be more imperative than ever that we find out what the hell is making you immune to it. Asterisk. Star Singer narrowed her eyes at Sunset. Why do you think I'll be so easy to convince, especially after the way you trashed our friendship? Sunset gave her a confused look. Trashed? What are you talking about? No pony outside my family knew you were my friend, and even then I had to drag you to see them. I did that to protect you, said Sunset. Star gave her an odd look. From what? Sunset stepped over to the apparatus. I had no idea if my plans would be discovered. I didn't want you to suffer the fallout with me. You mean you didn't want to risk it getting back to you through me? Sunset glanced at her. Well, yes, that too. You know I was always a very practical mare. Star looked at the apparatus with some interest and gestured at it with a hoof. And just what are you trying to do here? I've found a native who appears immune to the virus I harnessed to deliver the transformation spell, said Sunset. I've obtained some samples of his blood to find out why. You can help me with that. Star raised an eyebrow. What happened to practicality? There's nothing more practical than making use of the talents of a friend who unexpectedly showed up. Unless you have another point. You should be treating me like the enemy, Star said. I was working with Twilight to stop you. What if I do discover what's making this native immune and decide to use that knowledge to create some sort of vaccine against it? Don't be ridiculous, said Sunset. You have only the resources that I make available to you. By the time Twilight gets here, and you can get that information to her, it will be too late to do anything with it. You're that confident that you have everything all sewn up? Yes. I've had 20 years to prepare. Star Singer turned more fully towards Sunset. I think you're underestimating Twilight's abilities, Sunset. She was the bearer of the element of magic. She was already considered one of the smartest unicorns in Equestria before she ascended. When Tyrek returned, she was able to hold the equivalent magic of 4 alicorns inside her and fought him to a standstill. I'm delighted to hear you prove my point, said Sunset. 4 alicorns, and still not enough to bring down one enemy. That isn't what I meant. Star Singer cried. You're changing the subject. Starry, I believe you when you say Twilight is powerful, and she's already demonstrated her intelligence. But she is still only one mare. Star frowned. What do you mean, only one mare? I sensed only one pony traversing the portal. But... Sunset tilted her head. But what? Is there something I should know? Star Singer hesitated. She knew Twilight and Starlight had every intention of traversing the portal together. She doubted that Twilight would decide at the last minute to leave her behind. She remembered back when she had first heard that not only had Starlight Glimmer supposedly been reformed, but that she was actually Twilight's apprentice. That situation had horrified her, and she had struggled to reconcile her feelings towards it. It had taken actually meeting Starlight in person to realize that she never had completely made peace with it. Star still distrusted that unicorn, and now there was every possibility Starlight was on this world alongside Twilight. "Is she working with some pony else?" Sunset asked. "Not that I know of," Star Singer replied in a flat voice. Sunset's gaze lingered on Star's face for a few moments before she turned away. "I'm not going to force you to do anything, Starry. If you want to help, that would be great. If you don't, well, everything I've accomplished was without you in mind. Your help would be a boon, but there's little you can do to hinder my plans." Star raised an eyebrow. "Where are you going?" "I have a more personal role to play in all this," said Sunset. "It's part of my plan to ease the pain of transition for these natives. There's plenty of food and water upstairs for you. I would not try to go outside yet. It won't be safe to do that for another few days. Then you'll be able to better blend in with the transformed natives, though I'll have to hide your cutie mark at first." "You're just going to leave me here?" Star Singer said. Sunset turned around. "I considered casting a spell that would temporarily change you into a partially transformed native, but I don't have time to teach you how to use their appendages. Trust me, fingers and walking on only 2 legs takes a while to get used to." "And what am I supposed to do in the meantime?" Star Singer said. "Mull over what I've told you, Starry," said Sunset in a soft voice. "I really want you to understand that this is the way forward. Ask yourself this: do I want to trust the future to ancient magic and relics that I don't understand and can't control, or do I want the assurance that comes with a pool of power from a massive pony population?" Sunset vanished in a pop of teleportation magic. Asterisk. Sarah hurried over to Laura's travel bag, which had been packed several days ago. She sighed when she realized how much of it was filled with clothing that would no longer fit her daughter. She glanced behind her, where Laura struggled to adjust one of Jenny's old jeans to fit her better. Even something from when Jenny had been 10 was almost too big. Sarah's gaze flicked over her impromptu solution to Laura's new appendages. She had cut a blouse down the back and pinned it together behind Laura just under the wings. Jenny entered the room, carrying a pair of worn sneakers in her hands. A wavy pink tail swished behind her. Here you go," she said in a subdued voice. Laura smiled faintly and took them. "Thanks." She dropped them to the floor and slid a foot into one. Her ears drooped. "They're still too big. They're the smallest I could find." "Laura, try wearing an extra pair of socks," said Sarah. "Can't we just take the car?" Laura asked. "The first shelter they opened is in your school," said Sarah. "It's close enough to walk. They want as few cars on the streets as possible to let the state authorities through." She caught movement out of the corner of her eye and turned to see Harold standing in the hall. "Assuming we're still going to the school." "You are," said Harold. A thick blue tail emerged from the slot in the sweatpants that Sarah had altered the other day. "I just got off the phone with them. They still have space." "Where's Eileen?" "Talking to Bob." Sarah's ears drew back. "I didn't want them." "All right, never mind, we need to get going." Laura secured her sneakers still a bit loose even after another layer of socks and slowly stood. She winced as force of habit caused her to try to straighten up, and she nearly toppled. Sarah and Jenny rushed to her, but Jenny got there first and grabbed her arm, only to be batted about the head by a flurry of feathers from one of Laura's fluttering wings. "Ack! Laura!" Jenny cried. "Sorry," Laura said in a sheepish voice as her wings stilled. "I'm only just getting control over them." "It's okay," Jenny said softly. "I just, Laura tilted her head. "Are you all right?" "I just don't know what to say." Laura cracked a tiny smile. "Well, that's a first for you. I'd almost welcome a comment about the Fey Queen." She added in a lower voice, "I kinda miss it, as strange as that sounds. Sorry to disappoint, said Jenny in a neutral voice. She looked up at Sarah. Are you still going to stay with her? Sarah grabbed a coat from Laura's closet. Yes, if they'll let me. Mom, I'd be fine by myself, said Laura, though her conviction was weak. I don't want you to be without family. Sarah glanced at the others. Besides, I'm going to get the fur next, which means I'll be stooped over and will need help, too. Harold heard the growing quaver in his wife's voice. He stepped up to her, and she immediately turned and hugged him tightly. It'll be all right in the end, Sarah, he said gently. Sarah wanted to say that there was no way he could know that. She feared that once she and Laura were in the shelter, they would never come out, at least not as anything human. The fact that the rest of her family would likely soon follow did not fill her with any sense of joy. Sarah reluctantly broke off the hug. We better get going. She turned to Laura. Turn around, please. Can you draw your wings in more? I'm trying. Laura clenched her jaw as she exercised her will over the quivering masses of feathers. She managed to shrink them down against her back and sides, though they quivered with the effort. That's the best I can do. Sarah draped the coat over them and around Laura's shoulders. All right, let's go. Wait, Jenny said. She stepped up to Laura. I'm sorry about all this. It's not like it's your fault, said Laura softly. I mean all the fantasy stuff. I'm sorry if it ever made you feel bad. I didn't mean it that way. Laura smiled. I know. Jenny hesitated, then gave her sister a brief hug before stepping back. I hope to see you again soon. She glanced at her father's tail and her mother's ears. I mean, I hope you get better. That's what I meant. Laura nodded once, but from the solemn looks on everyone's faces, it was obvious they were all thinking what the more likely way they would be together again. Let's go, Sarah said in a slightly choked voice. Asterisk. I wanted to see Laura off, said Bob. Eileen closed the bedroom door behind her, her troubled gaze falling on her son from where he sat in front of his computer. This is more important. Besides, you told me you never really got close to Laura or Jenny. That's not the point. Bob shook his head. Never mind. What is it? Eileen stood with her hands behind her, still on the knob of the door. I want to take you out of here. Bob stared. Mom, you can't be serious. The whole town is locked down. I just want to get you out of this house. What's the point? Eileen frowned and stepped forward. You can say that after you saw Laura? She has fucking wings. Who knows what the hell else is going to happen to her? I've already been exposed, regardless of whether this is caused by the flu or not. Can't you see that taking me out of the house won't change that? Eileen sat down on the edge of the bed. I'm your mother. It's my responsibility to take care of you. The Tanners have been taking excellent care of me. And when they get to where they can't because of this thing. Bob averted his eyes and remained silent. Maybe I haven't been the best mother to you, but this is my chance to make up for it, said Eileen. Bob gave her a cross look. Hey! I want to wipe the slate clean. We'll use this as a means to start fixing everything that's wrong. Bob's eyes widened. What? We can start over, said Eileen in a softer voice. This made me realize how wrong I've been. I knew I should have settled down, pick a course for my life, and stick to it. Bob could only stare, dumbfounded. Eileen's smile faded. What is it? Bob turned away from his mother. He leaned his head against his hand on the desk. It took something like this to make you realize that? If none of this happened, you'd still be in Denver. Does that matter? It matters to me. Bob exploded. This wasn't the only crisis that ever happened. What about all those other times? What's so special about this one? Hey, this is more serious than you having a normal illness or a broken bone. You're missing the point. What makes me so important in your life right now? You were always important to me. Maybe this sounds weird, but the reason I didn't take you back was because your welfare is important. I knew I couldn't handle the responsibility. Then what's changed now? Bob demanded. What makes this event so damn special that you feel you can handle it all of a sudden? Or has something else happened that I don't know about that's made your situation so much better? Eileen hesitated. Well, it'll still be touch and go for a bit, but... Has anything changed? Not really. Then why? I've already answered that, said Eileen. No, you haven't, said Bob. All you've done is tell me things that are obvious facts, like you being my mother. Isn't that enough? No, because if it was, you wouldn't have sent me here in the first place. Eileen sighed. Is that what this is about, that you resent me sending you here? That's what I'm trying to make up for. Bob ran his hand through his hair and turned to face his mother fully. I think I finally get it now. You're not here because you think you can handle raising me. You're here to make yourself feel better. Eileen's eyes widened. That's not, fine, maybe that is part of my reason for being here. Can you blame me for feeling guilty about this? I guess I can't, said Bob in a neutral voice. So I absolve you of the guilt. What? Just what I said. You don't need to feel guilty. I don't resent you. I don't hate you. Eileen remained silent for a long moment before she said in a low voice, it doesn't work that way. Mom, I can't be responsible for how you feel. That's too much of a burden to put on me. I'm not. Yes, you are. Bob declared. Or you wouldn't have tried to kill yourself coming here when you were still sick. That's what a mother is supposed. Eileen started. Stop trying to prove yourself to me, it's not working. Eileen fell silent again, her eyes glistening. I'm not going with you just because now you're supermom who will brave anything to reach her son, said Bob in a lower but still tense voice. I appreciate the gesture, but it's not going to make anything better. Really, you should have stayed in Denver. Is that how it is then? Eileen cried in a quavering voice. You're okay with me so long as I stay away. I didn't mean that, said Bob softly. That's what it sounds like. Mom, I would love it if you visited more often. The only reason I resisted Skyping with you was because it was a pale substitute for the real thing. Eileen wiped her eyes. Then why the hell are you rejecting me like this? I'm not. I just meant you don't have to take care of me, said Bob. You care about me, but you don't have to care for me. Eileen took a deep breath and let it go as a shuddering sigh. That's what a mother is supposed to do. That's what my damn sister has pounded into my skull every chance she gets. You don't have to listen to her. Like hell I don't, Eileen muttered. She's the better mother, we both know that. Stop competing with her, Bob said. Why do you feel you have to? You love me, you want what's best for me, and you realized what was best for me is coming here. That's what a mother does. That's what you did. Maybe it doesn't feel like enough, Eileen said. That can't be my problem, Mom. I thought you wanted to go back with me, said Eileen. I never said that. You implied it. Bob paused. If that's what made you think you had to do this, I'm sorry. It's kind of complicated why I was thinking that last week. I just don't want to see you hurt. I want you to be part of my life, but I can't be your responsibility. Because I can't handle it. Eileen snapped. Bob gave her a forlorn look. I didn't mean. Eileen covered her face with her hands for a moment. I know you didn't, I'm sorry. She stood. I need some time alone. I need to think. I understand, said Bob as his mother turned away. He felt like he should say something else, but the words would not come to him. He could only watch as his mother left the room.